to everyone. I'll call our meeting to order. And before we start our business, I want to acknowledge the Victoria Regional Transit Commission conducts its business on the Lekwungen Traditional Territory, homelands, the Songhees, Nisquamish First Nation. I'm going to ask for an approval of the agenda, and when that approval is considered, under correspondence, there was a letter sent from the Graduate Student Society, and that had been distributed out to everyone. So whoever moves approval of the agenda, would you please include that as well?
Yeah, Chair, I'll move that. I'll move approval of the agenda and that the correspondence from the Graduate Society at UVic is included.
Second.
Moved, and that's seconded by Director Murdoch. And any discussion? Those in favor?
I have a question.
Director Thornton-Joe had her hand up.
Oh, pardon me, and please assist in that regard, in that I have not got all the faces on. So if I'm going past you, please, go ahead.
Just a question. We received the correspondence of the letter, but we also received an email this morning. Is that considered correspondence or?
Well, it's interesting because that correspondence sort of wasn't officially sent to the commission, but I wanted you to be aware of it. So I think it probably won't form part of our record, but it should help you in the discussion as we go.
Okay, thank you.
One more. We also had Chair, sorry to jump in, had a correspondence from the Camosun Student Society. Is that included in the agenda?
That's the piece of information that Charlene is speaking about.
Very good.
That is not official, but it's certainly for your availability in the discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, so all in favor of the motion?
In favor, yes.
Opposed? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, I will call that motion approved. And just brief chair remarks. And to acknowledge as well before we start that a number of directors have made contact with me to indicate they will have to leave for other important engagements. Totally understandable. So if it is time when you need to leave, please don't feel you need to make a comment. Just go about your business, and if you're able to rejoin, then that's fine. Another thing I'd like to mention is that we had that great discussion at our workshop, and we committed to ourselves that we would continue that discussion. So what we're going to do on our August 10th meeting, we will have that discussion prior to our formal meeting. And so that the public meeting will now run from 10 to 1, and we will meet prior to conclude our discussions on that workshop. And all of that information will be sent out to you by staff. I would like to welcome Robin Pollard to our meeting today. Robin is the student representing the UVic Student Society and has agreed to be the student rep for this incoming year. Robin, are you on the line?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Hi. Welcome to the meeting, Robin. We look forward to working with you, and at each meeting now, before the meeting concludes, we're going to make space available for the student rep to report back on anything you feel. So, but don't leave your comments to then take part in the meeting as obviously one of the members.
Thank you so much.
Okay, look forward to it. And with that, Commission, I think we're ready to launch in, and our first item of business is actually that correspondence from the UVic graduate students. And I will confess that I didn't realize we had a separate contract for the UPass with the graduate students as opposed to the regular students at UVic. So learned something through this. And this information may be, at your discretion, suitable to forward on to when we have the general discussion about student involvement and relationships with the Transit Commission. So with that, the correspondence is on the floor. It's open for your consideration. You can receive it. You can refer it to discussion on the student involvement, perhaps number 7 on the agenda, whatever.
So, Chair, if I may, perhaps we could ask the Robin for her opinion as the student rep from UVic, as a sort of her first opinion on that.
So Robin, on the graduate students correspondence, do you have a preference as to where we handle that?
Yeah, I think if we could refer for it to be under consideration when folks are considering motion 7 on the agenda, that would be great because it does relate quite closely. I think that information is what actually inspired this letter to come about. So I think it's quite relevant.
So, Chair, I'd like
Perfect.
to move that, please, if that's necessary.
Yes, please. Thank you. You have a seconder?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mayor Helps. Any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? That motion and that item will be dealt with when we come to item number 7. Thank you. There were no notices of motion filed. That takes us now. Oh, do I hear a voice? No? And I so appreciate any effort you make to sort of jump in front, yell out to me, say you didn't see my hand, whatever, because I have a very limited view of the members of commission just because of this circumstance here with this, this technology this morning. Moving then to number 6, and I'm going to ask Megan to take us through the 2020-21 annual performance. Megan, thanks.
Thank you. Let's wait for the. Lisa, are you in control of the? Where's Sasha?
Kara's in control.
Oh, Kara, great, thank you. Yes, so this is the year-end results for the fiscal 2021 year. And I will touch on some highlights as we go through the presentation, and please just raise your hand if there are any questions along the way. Go to the next couple slides. This is the summary, but what I'll do is I'll touch base on the individual slides as we go through. If you could go down, yeah, revenue and passenger trips. So in general, though, not much changed from our Q3 forecast to our year-end results, with the exception of the Safe Restart funding, which I'll talk about in a moment. But we were under budget on revenue and, of course, as expected, lower than last year due to impact on COVID. One thing to note is that BC Bus Pass revenue was on budget because we received 100% of that, and advertising revenue was on budget. And the other pieces, of course, which we care mostly about is the passenger trips. They were below budget by 16%, and they did end up 58% below last year's actuals. Our target was more around 45%. We came in around the 42, 43%. So it was lower, of course, in the first year, and it slowly gained traction through the year and sort of rested around the 45, 48% by year end. So there's any questions on that? All right.
Susan, can I?
Yes, please, go ahead.
This, in reading through all of this, I think the information shared is fairly straightforward. Where I'm not entirely clear, and I appreciate the report, is just where are we looking at now and predictions going forward, and how much, I guess, as a governance body here, looking at the risk to the organization. What happens if we come up to say 70% levels and that sort of stays the reality for the next year? And I don't want to be pessimistic, but I mean, there's still, people aren't moving back into the downtown offices very quickly. There's still, reluctance even with all the changes to getting onto crowded buses and things. I mean, I think there's still some headwind here for us to get back to quote unquote normal. And so where's our financial risk here? I know we've got, a second year of funding from the federal government and provincial government, but where's our risk to the threshold if we're not, if we're not sort of ramping up, and how do we flag that?
Excellent question. And obviously transit systems around the province are, asking the same thing. Megan, can you give us any information about what are the options if the circumstances are as Kevin suggests, not into recovery at the rate anticipated?
It's a great, I mean, it is the question of the day, of course. A couple things. One, we don't know what will happen in September when universities go back to in session as well. And each month as the new health orders are announced, we don't know yet the impact of people being back in the office, et cetera. But I agree, it's our biggest risk is the number of passengers and revenues that we'll receive. I don't have that handy with me, so I don't want to quote any numbers, of course. But I think at our next commission meeting, what I'd like to do is come forward with a 3-year projection and have that, healthy discussion around risks and options then, if that's all right with you. Our target next year is this current year, is to hit around 55-60% passengers uptake compared to 1920. And then the following year, I believe it's around the 80%. Now that might be, we might not feel comfortable with that level of optimism, but I'd rather take the time and do a presentation over 3 years and talk about options for the risks at the next meeting, if that's all right with you.
Kevin? No further questions, Kevin. Then Rob, you got a question?
Thank you. Really quickly, just in regards to the advertising revenue, and I think it's spectacular that it's so did not drop. But if we looked at 2019, we saw that there was about 27,000 passenger trips, and then 2020, 2021 was only about 12. Do we expect that our advertisers are going to ask for a rebate or anything along those lines?
Megan?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know.
Megan, I can.
I don't know if you know anything about that. You could answer that.
Be happy to provide a little bit of an update. I have engaged with this guy in preliminary discussions with our advertising partner in Lamar, and it doesn't seem at this time that they'll be looking for any sort of rebate or refund. They haven't. We haven't renegotiated or come to determination on that as of yet, but all signs point towards that they will not be asking for any sort of rebate on their advertising minimums that they didn't actually hit.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Rob. Any further questions on what Megan has gone through so far? Then we'll return it to her to carry on. No further questions. So Megan, you take us through.
Okay, and Kevin, are you comfortable with that, or do you want to sort of talk about the risk a bit more?
No, I'm very happy with that. Thank you. I think next meeting and having information to decide to discuss is far better than speculating. So let's do that. Thank you.
Okay,
I did answer that. I guess I've got a similarly weird mute system here where apparently I muted myself on my physical device without muting it on the app. So sorry about that. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. So if you scroll down to the next slide, please. So I guess one piece of good news was post our Q3, our last meeting in our Q3 forecast, there was a decision made on the final amounts of the Safe Restart funding, which was the contingency amount. And that was allocated across all transit systems based on the actual loss of passenger revenues. And Victoria received 4.6 out of the 6 million. That was in the total contingency fund. And in addition, we were successful in getting another $2.3 million for the fuel tax because we lost more than the original 1 million we had estimated. So in total, between Q3 and year end, we got an additional $6.9 million of Safe Restart funding. So that's helpful. That helps going forward and to the next year or two. And that'll be part of that'll help in our discussion for next time, how much is in our transit fund. So that amount will go directly into the transit fund, that additional 6.9. And provincial operating funding was 2.1 million below budget because they pay on actual operating expenses, which was below budget. And the fuel tax revenue came in under budget because of lower fuel sales in the region. Next.
On that sheet,
Next slide.
don't see anyone. Thank you, Megan.
Okay, great. And on operations, not including fuel, we were under budget. There were fewer service hours delivered, lower labor and taxi cost in our Handy Dart system. And that was offset, of course, by our COVID-related expenses, and our insurance costs did go up this year. And with fuel sort of saved the day on our operating expenses. It was 3.2 million below budget. Our average fuel price was 93 cents instead of $1.18 that we budgeted. And the service hours were 79,000 hours below budget. A big chunk of that in the conventional service, mostly in the January, February, March period, where scheduling was able to find efficiencies by, I believe, reducing running times, but keeping the same number of trips. So it doesn't impact the customer at all, but it does reduce our actual service hours, so to speak. So there are savings due to that as well.
Any questions on the operations?
Yeah, Susan, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. With respect to insurance costs increasing, is that something that we should be aware of? Is that a trend that's going to continue to go up? Do you have a sense of why those insurance costs increase? So that just caught my attention. I wanted to ask.
Sure. It was mostly sort of our risk insurance, our facility insurance that saw the big increase. And as you know, actually our ICBC insurance going forward will be much lower than budgeted. So the two are going to balance each other out in this fiscal year. But in the last fiscal year, it was sort of the risk facility insurance that we saw the big spike in, as opposed to vehicle insurance.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? No? Yeah.
If you could go to the next, just that graphic on the fuel, as we've all noticed that at the pumps, we had a good year overall, but you can see the trend, and that's something we'll definitely be monitoring for this year. Hopefully it will be higher probably than budget, but I'm hoping it'll stay flat instead of continuing to grow at the same rate it grew towards the last half of this fiscal year. Okay, next slide, please. Fleet maintenance and facility maintenance, basically on budget. We had lower labor costs offset by some COVID expenses. Then the facility, there were some facility maintenance savings that were offset again by COVID expenses, and we were able to capitalize the CNG fueling equipment. So, but basically, I'd say on budget for that area.
Seeing
Next.
you can carry on.
And again, on administration, basically on budget, we had some lower marketing and information systems costs. There were some COVID-19 expenses and some staffing increases to deal with COVID, etc. And that's about it. There's not much change there. And the last slide that I usually talk about is our lease fees. And we did come under budget just due to timing, things going into service. And of course, we've already talked about that the lease fees were lower relative to last year because we had the lease fee holiday for 6 months of this fiscal year.
And that was, just to remind the members of the commission, that was determined through the BC Transit Finance Department, a way to give us some relief. They were able to to find some opportunity to hold back on that. So, I mean, that was another piece of the puzzle that allowed us to get through here.
Yeah. Are there any other questions or any other items you'd like me to bring forward in our next meeting that I can prepare for besides Kevin's request?
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty broad one, and keep it, I think, I speak for Kevin here, you would like any or all information that Megan might deem to be helpful. And I thought that the sort of focus of your question was, when do we start knowing we're not going to meet targets, and what are the options and risks for the system? I don't know, Kevin, if I've captured that. Otherwise, feel free to jump in.
I think that's not too bad. I you know, at the end of the day, there's a pretty substantial risk to this organization if our revenues aren't come back. And so, and at some point, if, you know, we have a bailout right now, that's not going to be there forever. So I guess I would like us to, you know, take a sober look at that as a board and just make sure that we've thought through the ramifications of that. Like, do we want to start making some adaptations now in anticipation that might happen? Or what is our, you know, what is, are the projections, you know, which sound, you know, frankly, you know, pretty conservative, which I think is just healthy. Are those appropriate? Is that with the board, you know, feels comfort, those sort of broader questions, I think. And then from that, if there's changes, then, or, you know, then that would be the point that we'd have that discussion. But I think those sort of general, what the staff are working on and their expertise, you know, should guide us. And I don't anticipate any major departures, but it is ultimately our responsibility. We're held to account for that. So we should be looking at that and making sure that we are comfortable with those risk profiles going forward.
Absolutely, we'll have that discussion. Any other members have comments at this point, or you can wait till we have that discussion at our next meeting? Seeing none, then I'm sort of hearing a bit of an echo there, as though nobody's coming in. We'll look forward to that discussion then, for sure. Fingers crossed our projections for the turnaround happen. There's so many factors to be at play there. So with that, if that completes that, is there anything further, Megan, you wish before we consider a motion to approve the underperformance results?
No, I'm good, thank you.
If no member of the commission has further questions or comments, entertain a motion to approve that report. Moved by, was that Director Murdoch?
Yes.
And second
by Haynes.
Seconded by Director Haynes. You know, I never know what to call you, directors, commissioners, first name, whatever. Call the question, those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Megan, for that. I know there's a tremendous amount going on behind the scenes. Now we're going to move to an item that is on our agenda because it was a member of this commission that suggested, and the commission agreed that we would look at options for how more wholesomely to involve the student transit and students and consider an advisory committee. And I'm going to turn this to Lisa just to say how it went from where we were when we last met till now. And then I fully appreciate that we've been given a signal that there may be a request from Robin for some direction for this. So Lisa, why don't you let us know what transpired after the commission gave its direction.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair Bryce. So yes, this came from the last meeting in February, where staff were asked to look at different types of educational advisory committees at transit agencies and bring back a report. So I did do some research as laid out in the report as to what other organizations have done, including TransLink, including Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, and some smaller communities like Orillia in Ontario. And this would actually pose a unique, I think, opportunity for post-secondary students in the region. All of the ones that I had investigated either had citizens that were on a transportation committee that reported up to a council. There wasn't really any that just had a group of post-secondary students. So I think that this was a unique opportunity. And of course, we already have with the Victoria Regional Transit Commission, our Accessible Transit Advisory Committee. And that certainly was the case at many of the other organizations as well, that the only advisory committee that they had was an Accessible Transit Advisory Committee. Some of them had transportation committees that made up sort of multimodal transportation committees that were citizens at large, along with elected officials that then reported up to an independent council. But it did seem like we already kind of had the groundwork here at the Victoria Regional Transit Commission to kind of move forward and have a more collaborative opportunity with post-secondary students. I certainly did look at, as I know Mayor Murdoch had brought up at the last meeting, maybe inclusion of school districts as well. But it did seem that there was, number one, they report to a different ministry, and there was very different through the school district system. Some of them had school busing, some did not. It was hard to kind of draw a direct correlation in the way that we can with our post-secondary students that are all UPass organizations. So of course, UVic, Camosun College, and Royal Roads all give a significant amount of revenue to the commission through the UPass program. And as such, I wanted to try and include all of them in this guiding on the student experience for post-secondary students. Now, my thoughts were to kind of lay out the groundwork for what this advisory committee might look like, and then allow the commission to decide if we wanted to move forward on that. I did attach sort of some next steps and really just a draft terms of reference, because the students sit in their positions for a year, and we just had Quinn, of course, move on from being our representative as the non-voting member of the commission, and we've now welcomed Robin. I had started this discussion with Quinn prior to him leaving, and had just started it with Robin, and really haven't had a thorough outreach with the students. I've touched base with Royal Roads, and we do have ongoing discussions regarding UPass negotiations happening right now with all the institutions, but the thought was that the students would help with the draft terms of reference and ratify that with a collaborative effort between all the post-secondary students and myself, and then hopefully get up to having meetings 2 to 4 times a year in alignment with the commission meetings to be able to offer some advice to the commission on what's working well for transit with post-secondary students and what things we might need to improve. Having said that, yes, we did have a couple letters that came in, and I know Robin had indicated that they might want to have some further discussion on this before moving forward. So perhaps I can conclude it there and see if we want to kind of hear from Robin on the students' thoughts on this committee.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, very much. And I think, Robin, you're your first meeting, and we're going to ask you to take the lead on this. And I know you've got some direction you would like the commission to consider. So over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, it was nice being able to touch base with you before this. We were able to meet with, or I was able to meet with Camosun Student Society and the Graduate Student Society of Victoria, UVic, yesterday. Unfortunately, we were not able to connect with Royal Roads, and I haven't been able to contact them for a little while, so I wasn't able to get any feedback from them. But I'm glad that, Lisa, you were able to connect with them. I think the GSS and UVSS and the CCSS feel as though just a bit rushed in this process, and I think that there's a lot of good work that went into it and a lot of hard work that went into it, but we still feel as though we've not been kind of properly consulted and collaborated with in the creation of the Student Transit Advisory Committee. And so as a result, in our meeting yesterday, it just we didn't have enough time to kind of really figure out what it was that we hope to see out of this committee, especially with certain changes that are being requested, such as the non-voting seat being the structure of that being changed. And so, as many of you know, the non-voting seat is something that came about as a result of the lobbying efforts of UVSS and CCSS. And the way the seat is structured currently and rotates reflects that agreement that existed between the UVSS and CCSS and the VRTC. So direct communication about that beforehand would have been great, because I'm not sure what Royal Roads was, what their communication has been, but it's a pretty big ask of them, considering we haven't had too much communication with them on trans advocacy. I'm not sure kind of where they're at and if they would want to take that on even. And so, yeah, I think those are some of the main concerns. Just consultation and the structural change of that. And we kind of all at the meeting last night or yesterday came to an agreement that having a committee like this could be a really great step for students. Super exciting. But we all, especially Camosun Student Society and the UVSS, wanted to just reiterate that it's not what our previous or true ask is, as many of you will remember. And so, you know, Camosun Student Society and UVSS have really been advocating for a voting seat, which was the original intent of establishing a non-voting seat on the VRTC. And we still believe that even though the creation of an advisory committee is really great, to have true and meaningfully represent the voices of students, we believe that that voting seat could really be an effective and meaningful way to have our voices as such big stakeholders in the process. Yeah.
Thanks, Robin. Excellent synopsis of where transit is and where the students are, and delighted to hear that there is an interest in obviously even being more engaged, and certainly more collaboration and discussion, I think, would be something that this commission would welcome. What I'm going to do, because all commission members now have had an opportunity to hear from Robin's reflection on the draft report that was provided for us, I'll open it up to any member of the commission to comment, to reflect, to make a determination, and let's see where we take this. So commission members, any thoughts on this? Kevin? I can't hear you, Kevin.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, there we are.
A little slow on the unmute. Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate the report and the feedback from Robin on this one. I think this is very appropriate. It's back to this table right now, just to get some direction from the board in terms of what we're interested in. I think, you know, as we sort of firm this out, going back out to the student societies and getting their more fulsome feedback and time makes a lot of sense. When I you know, suggested this this possibility of this advisory committee, I thought, I mean, the goal here is to my mind, students as a whole make up a really substantial portion of our ridership, and because they're often done through passes and things, they have a different experience with the you know, in terms of being represented at the fare booth, and things like that are not necessarily seen as visibly, and have unique issues, right? They have issues, you know, if you have athletes who are having to travel for school sports teams, you have, you know, band members who have to carry equipment on and off the buses. Like there are aspects of student life that are not necessarily reflected in the other ridership that we have, that are sort of more commercial and so forth. So I think that visibility, and that kind of similar to the ATAC, which, you know, the people with disabilities, their experiences can really help us inform improvements that would not otherwise be heard as one-off issues, just someone complaining or something, but can have a much more amplified voice. So I still think that's really worthwhile. As I've sort of sat back and I read this report, I think that representation is really critical. It does not replace or change the role of the person at this table. Robin's here, and I think, to be able to participate in the debates and to raise these issues more fulsomely is one thing. But a lot of what Atac does is it informs the operational side of things. I don't know how many times we've seen, reports coming to our table of discussions that happened at Atac, and they were put into operational changes, just by staff without having to come to the board and deal with the governance type things, but are just more operational improvements. And with that sort of thought in mind, I think we had to take away a little bit of the fear of dilution or anything else. I think we want as fulsome an advisory committee as we can possibly have. That's my thought. So I would actually like to see us have the school districts. There's 4 school districts, right? 61, 62, 63, and 93. And I include 93 as the Francophonie, which is provincial wide, but has schools here, because I'm sure the Francophonie students' experience is probably quite different than it is for other people. First of all, they travel farther, they have more issues on things. So I think the broader this group is, and that, if it meets just once or twice a year, but has that broader spectrum of usage and feedback and thoughts that can inform both the operational pieces, but also occasionally bring policy changes and things to this table would be really, really beneficial. So my general feeling on this, we're better off with a more broad spectrum inclusion on this. I actually don't think that the representation at the board table has to change from the Camosun and UVic rotation that we have currently. I think that's actually a separate issue that we might want to delve into more depth. But I think right now, if I would prefer to focus on the committee itself and the makeup of that committee, and then take back the broad guidelines from this body back to the representative pieces. And I don't know if the school districts were included, what that would look like. Would it be students? Would it be members of this? I think that's probably the best bet. But how that representation happens, those are quite difficult because they're so spread out. But that's my take on this. I want this to have the best possible representation to give the best possible advice, not just for us, but for the operational improvements as well.
Thank you for that. Other members of the commission? Not seeing any indication.
Susan will come in on that. Susan,
Yes,
if
go
I may.
ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So I really appreciate the approach that Commissioner Murdoch has presented there, to have this as a fulsome outreach group. But I think when it came forward, in my mind, as was expressed just now, I didn't see it as replacing the current structure. It was a way of getting more people at the table to hear from a broader spectrum of students. If it can embrace the school districts, that would be very interesting. There may be, as we saw, some logistic issues there. They don't have a centralized body that speaks for all the schools, but that might be a challenge they could take on. But I think the way Commissioner, I'm having trouble with Mayor Murdoch, Director
I know,
Murdoch, or Commissioner
exactly.
Murdoch, or
Let's go, because of our situation that we're in right at this point, to just go with the first name. And yeah.
Thank you. I think I like the approach that has been described by Kim.
Others, your reaction?
Sure, Susan, I'll weigh in.
Yeah.
I agree that the issue of the addition of Royal Roads as into the rotation is a completely separate matter and should be kind of struck from this discussion. I get how it was like, I get the thinking like there are 3, let's have all 3, but I think that's a separate discussion, and there's not really direction from the committee to change that, or the commission rather, nor have we heard from Royal Roads that they want that. So if that kind of happens organically, that's fine, but I think that should be struck from the discussion as of now. So with that, I guess if we put that aside, I wonder if Robin has any insight as to whether these terms of reference do need to go back I guess it's a good idea. I'd like to see this committee set up as soon as possible. not spending, 6 months on terms of reference. So if the question of the Royal Road student is taken out, and I disagree with Kevin about adding in school districts. The school districts don't have a UPass program. And the UPass is a key funder of transit, which is, again, we can't rehash old debates, but which is why I actually think it makes sense to have the students as a voting member, because they pay a heck of a lot of money into the system. School districts don't, and it might be, so I think that again would be a separate issue. So what I would recommend is if Robin thinks that if the question of the Royal Road student is out, if the UVic and well, I guess we do need to add in the graduate. So maybe it does need a bit more work. So Susan, when you're looking for a motion, what I would propose is that we refer this to the student societies, including the Graduate Student Society, for their input, but strike out the question of adding Royal Roads to the table or into the rotation, and then I guess get feedback and get these ratified at the next commission meeting, and leave the question of school districts out. But that's only me. Maybe others think that that's a good idea. So I'll cede the floor.
If that motion of yours was a motion considered, Lisa, and it specifically says leave the Royal Roads out of the rotation, did you want Royal Roads included in the discussion regarding the advisory committee?
Absolutely. Yeah, Royal Roads should definitely be part of the advisory committee, but they've never said to us we want to be in on the rotation. So I don't know. Maybe they did. I'm not sure where that came from. Maybe Lisa could tell us. It seemed to come out of the blue but maybe it was Royal. Yeah. So maybe we could get some more information about the thinking behind adding Royal Roads into one of the student rotation seats.
Is there anything at this point you can add to our understanding?
Well, I've been going through conversations with Kyle with each of the post-secondary schools around UPass programs. And certainly Royal Roads indicated they had some unique issues, and of course, we didn't have the direction from the commission yet to form an advisory committee, but in putting feelers out about if they wanted to participate in collaboration with other students on the student experience, there seemed to be an excitement about participating in that. And certainly we could do that through the advisory committee without the rotation, but it just became a thing where I thought, well, if all three UPass holders are involved, it just seemed from discussion I had heard from the past with Maite and Mayor Martin that there not being enough folks on the West Shore going to university because of transportation issues, that maybe this was a good way to have a representation of the entire region. And they seemed eager to provide some input into transit. They're certainly having some struggles there with wanting to get buses down into Royal Roads and how we do that and service levels. So certainly we didn't have a huge discussion around it, and I can see both sides of it. And I am really looking for direction from the commission here today. It was just my best research to kind of pull things together and go, how would I see this working in a perfect world? So looking for your direction.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. That's really helpful. And I think, maybe step one is let's get this advisory committee set up with Royal Roads, UVSS, GSS, and Camosun Student Society. And then maybe it'll evolve at that table as to how the seat can work. Is it good how it is? Do we need different rotations? So that would be my preference, is get the table set up and essentially let the table make a recommendation to us as to the rotation of the seats at the commission.
Good thoughts, Lisa. Comments from others, either on the suggested course forward from Lisa or someone with a different take on this?
Jeff Orr has his hand up.
Okay, Jeff. Thanks, Lisa. Jeff?
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. I just have three things to say. I support the initiative. I think it needs to be inclusive, however we define that. So I like the dialogue of the more, the better. I think let's not exclude. It needs to be representative of the users that we're trying to target. And we need to set very clear expectations about what we are intending as far as the outcomes, so that we do not set unreasonable expectations in terms of where the voice of this advisory committee will go and what say it will have or what importance it will have. Those are the only 3 points that I have. Thank you.
Really good points, Jeff. In fairness to everyone, as you say, to set the expectations and not have ambiguity. Others on the commission?
Hi, Susan. It's Maya.
Yeah. Hi, Maya.
Hi. So I agree with what Mayor Helps had said in terms of setting the table and getting going, and I would agree that the rotation will hopefully evolve naturally as the committee forms. I think there will be challenges engaging the school districts. So in the case of, let's say SD 62, who would be the point person? Would it be one of the trustees then, which is a different than hearing more grassroots from students? And then how many schools would then be appointing a liaison? Because then there could be quite, is it someone from the leadership class at Edward Milne? Is it Belmont? Is it Royal Bay? Is it some of the others? So it would start to grow, but I do think that any sort of sharing of information from the school districts to transit to this particular body would help. I just think that the membership would start to change. Even out here when we have youth representatives, it's challenged with school hours and so forth to have participation. So it's not that we're giving up, it's just not that easy. So we'll even getting participation hold up the conversations that are needed to have at this particular table. But in terms of what Lisa from Transit had said, like we did hear from high school students and through some studies that have been done, and I think Royal Roads actually spearheaded that our students are not moving on to post-secondary at the same rate as core municipalities are, and because of transportation and the lack of adequate transit service. So that is a challenge, and that's why free transit for youth didn't resonate out in our community, because our youth would be left behind. So I think that voice though is still relevant and necessary, and we have challenges for young people to get to work and so forth because of the limited transit that exists out here. So it is valid. I just don't know how you would engage with the school districts and how you would go. That could take quite a bit of time, and then meanwhile this committee would be held up. And I think it's important that the advisory committee get going, in particular because of the COVID impacts and what that looks like and how we plan service and so forth. Like I heard, for example, that because the international student participation couldn't happen because of COVID, that the virtual learning increased the number of students currently attending UVic. But how would that transition in terms of if all those first year students continued on, where would they meet on campus or would they continue virtually? It's an interesting challenge. And it'll impact transit. So that's where I think we need to get rolling on this. And then it is a similar piece where some school districts have school buses, some don't, and so forth. So, but I think the information share is incredibly important as we're planning and going forward. Thank you.
Would it be fair to say, Maya, that you support the advisory committee at this time being the post-secondary UPass members, post-secondary, the 3 universities, plus I guess the graduate students, and that perhaps from the beginning of that, well, the launch of that a year from that time, the commission revisit to see whether or not there are opportunities to add the secondary schools?
Yeah, I think it needs to be looked at. But I mean, even from a planning perspective, the school district gives good data to transit for planning the routes already. I think it's more the riders' unique experiences and how that works, which would be sort of the critical piece. But I think right now I think this work needs to go on. I just think engaging the schools is going to be difficult because who's going to be at the table representing the school district? It's different if it's an elected trustee, right?
Yeah, and I just wanted to expand on that and assure people that yes, in terms of the school districts currently, myself and planning do meet with all the school districts when we're planning service, and Mayor Tate's right, we do get really good data, but that isn't meeting with the students in particular. It's meeting with the school districts about bell times and about what the students are experiencing in terms of where they're getting served and not getting served. But certainly to hear about their actual experiences, that usually comes in the form of when we're doing public engagement and we get some information that way. But it is challenging to kind of pinpoint what students would be representing on this committee, and that's kind of where I struggled as well. I mean, we certainly want the more feedback, the better, to make the customer experience better, whether it's for post-secondary or for any students. There is also our marketing department is working on a customer advisory committee. And I'll be able to bring more information forward to the commission at some point too, because we really have a new position for youth at BC Transit, and I can't speak fully to it right now, but our marketing department's working on something that might actually tie in nicely to how we reach out to youth throughout the region to get the customer experience. So there's more to come on that as well, but I just wanted to make sure that you all had that information on the outreach that we currently do.
So it looks like, Commission, we've got sort of three main topics: whether to have post-secondary to include the public school system. It would seem that, generally speaking, I don't think there's support for that. Whether or not this needs to go back for further consultation with the students, as suggested by Robin, it would seem that that makes sense. And then the third tranche is the business about whether to do a change in the rotation of the seat at the commission and to expand it to include rural roads. And from what I'm picking up at this point, the thinking is keep things like that as they are, and that may ultimately come as some kind of a recommendation to us from the body. Is there any aspect of this that we've not picked up with that? And if that is kind of the direction that the commission is thinking of going, would somebody prepared to make a motion?
I'll make that motion, Chair, that the second item, that this goes back to the student body as identified by Robin for further consultation.
Okay, should we take it, Lisa?
And maybe if I could help finish the sentence, and that the question of the rotational representation at the Victoria Regional Transit Commission not be part of this conversation, but be put to the table for their consideration once established.
Agreed.
Good. Movers agreeing with that, and you're seconding that, Lisa?
Sure am.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion? Any hand that I'm not seeing? No, I'll call the.
Sorry, I have my hand up, Susan. Sorry, it's Kevin here.
Yes, go ahead. Pardon me.
So just a couple of things on this. And I don't have any particular issue with the motion as it's going forward. I think I just want to make sure we're clear that this is going back to include the Graduate Student Society. I think that was a general agreement. Secondly, I think that the terms of reference, I think we could just maybe clarify in there, similar to Atac, that that committee will essentially be, their minutes will come to the board for review, like for information. So that's how they're going to communicate with the board. There's not sort of some direct piece where, they're feeding to the representative to advocate on that body is essentially separate and reporting through that mechanism, because I think that has to be clear that's because those will inform both operational and policy pieces. And third, I would like to see something on here that initiates a conversation with the 4 school districts and asks them how they might see a path forward to join this committee going forward. And that can happen more than a year from now, but can start the process now. So we'd start the committee as it is, but simultaneously reach out to the 4 school districts and get a sense from them of if they wanted to participate in this, the students wanted to participate in this, how that might look going forward.
What I'm going to suggest, so that there's no misunderstanding, because everything that you're saying, I think everybody agrees with. If we dealt with the motion, I'd like a supplementary motion to come directing staff to have some of the exploratory talks with the post-secondary. That's
okay,
this motion.
That's good. I don't think there's any motion required for the terms of reference. So I'm happy with that process. I just wanted to raise it before we got too far. So thank you.
Further discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor of the motion? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for that. And is there a subsequent motion, Kevin?
Just to direct staff to reach out to the 4 school districts, 61, 62, 63, 93, to I guess to assess their interest and solicit ideas on involvement of students within this advisory body.
And this has no timeline on it, so this is something that will not hold up our next review of this advisory committee.
No, absolutely not. I think it just is done in parallel, and when we can resolve something, it'll come back.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Waiting for a seconder?
Yeah, sorry, Director Martin.
Mayor Tate? No.
Hands are going
Go
up. It's hard
ahead.
to see.
Okay, that's right. I'll take that as Rob Martin is seconding that.
Can I just make one comment on this as well? I think that I appreciate that there's an easy divide of the UPass piece, but I mean, Atac doesn't fund massively transit, but we still solicit their input. Students through the UPass do, through other services, we don't quite as clear. But at the end of the day, I think that's one area that we'd like to seek, substantial improvements in uptake and usage. And so I think it's critical for us to hear why they're not and try and adjust our services over time to encourage those uses through service improvements and so forth. So I think it's really critical that we talk to the high school students to understand what the barriers are for higher transit usage, and I think this would be a good mechanism for that.
Further discussion or comments on the motion? Call the question. Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And I want in particular to thank Robin for giving us the background that assisted us in dealing with this matter. And there will be further discussion. And I want to thank staff. I think staff were very sensitive to the fact that sometimes we may be seen as moving too slowly. And so there was an effort to sort of get things going. And I think it got the discussion going well. And it's now going to be even better with more input. So thanks for that. The next item on our agenda, planning update. Levi?
Thank you, Chair Bryce, and members of the Commission for having me here today. Just a quick update from a planning perspective. The planning and scheduling teams have both been really busy in the last several months, both working on some of the long-range plans for the Victoria Regional Transit System and also facilitating some of the ongoing operational service planning activities. A quick update before I dive into the details. As a reminder, so we're currently operating at reduced COVID service levels, and we've slowly been reintroducing service levels over time as part of the Safe Restart Agreement. And with the confirmation that post-secondary institutions are going back into full in-person classes again this fall, we've had to pivot a little bit, and really we've been working hard to really see where can we best reintroduce those service levels to meet that demand that we're expecting for, in particular, our UVic and Camosun campuses within the region. So yeah, we've accelerated the pace of return to those targeted service levels. In terms of the specific service changes coming up, we've got our summer service change that's happening in about 3 weeks. Once again, the seasonal change to accommodate the end of the K-12 semester. And then as well, we are making some changes to the Route 53. Once again, just to change where that route is operating and to make some minor improvements to certain members of the rural community. For the fall service change, that one is a pretty major change. We're reintroducing a very large amount of service back into the system for that anticipated increase in demand. So routes 4, 7, 11, 12, 14, 15, 21, 26, a lot of those post-secondary school routes, we're going to be reintroducing some improved service levels. As well, I just want to flag that there's going to be some changes to routes 1 and 22 to align with some City of Victoria roadway projects that are currently being planned and underway that will likely be occurring sometime this fall as well. So working with City of Victoria staff on that. In terms of our long range plans, we are continuing to work on the Peninsula Local Area Transit Plan. We've had initial key stakeholder engagement, and we're working right now on implementing a full public engagement process that we're looking to launch later this June, at the end of the month. And as well, the West Shore Local Area Transit Plan refresh, we're looking to kick off later this very soon, essentially within the next month or two. We're soliciting some consultant support to get that process moving, just given the rapid pace of development that we've seen in the West Shore since the original 2015 plan was completed. And then as well, I think it's important to note that as we move forward with Rapid Bus, that plan as well can look at synergies in terms of network changes to align with Rapid Bus and implementation there. With that segue, the Rapid Bus implementation strategy is now complete, and we're working with the ministry right now on a joint public announcement sometime in the near future, and we'll continue to bring updates back to the Commission as we get them on that process. In terms of bus stops and infrastructure, bus stop infrastructure updates, we continue to work with a number of local governments throughout the region to improve accessibility and really improve the experience of using bus stops across the system. And then as well, we've awarded 11 transit shelters throughout the Victoria region to different municipalities through our BC Transit Shelter Program. So that's exciting, and we're able to continue to improve our transit infrastructure within the region to improve the customer experience and hopefully continue to drive ridership growth into the future. One more thing I'll flag is we're working with the City of Victoria on the Legislature Exchange. So we've received notification from City of Victoria staff that they would like to see a third of the capacity of that Legislature Exchange relocated temporarily to facilitate some cycling infrastructure changes. So we're working with their staff right now, looking at options and assessment. We'll continue to bring updates back on that process to the Commission as that evolves and develops. Development referral process, we continue to work with the local governments in providing feedback to our local governments through the development process from a transit perspective. Once again, really hoping and helping to align our land use and our transit planning within the region through the development process. With that, that's really all I had to bring forward to the Commission today, but certainly happy to answer any questions that the Commission may have at this time.
Good. Thanks very much, Levi. Questions? Members of the Commission? Yes, Rob.
Thank you. Just a quick question in regards to Fort Rod Hill, and it being a National Historical Site, and I'm getting a significant number of people reaching out to me, feeling frustrated that the closest you can get is the Colwood Exchange, and then it's about a 2-kilometer walk to get there. Have we, and especially with summer and with COVID and trying to push people into environments where they're outside and doing that, is there any way that numbers would get to a point that we could actually provide service to our national park? Or historical site, excuse me?
That's an excellent question. So through the chair, I think now is the right time to ask that question. We're about to kick off the West Shore Local Area Transit Plan refresh process. So if we have direction from the Commission, it's something that we can certainly explore through that process.
So, sorry, through the chair, if I may, could I just get some historical background on that? Like, I'm gonna guess that it's been looked at in the past. Has it just not been any numbers to support providing that service? Like, as I said, it's only 2 kilometers from the Colwood Exchange, and to seem to run a bus once every 3 hours or something even down there would seem. But has there been any historical data on that, or any decisions previous to when I sat on the Commission?
Levi?
Through the chair, I'd have to look into that in greater detail. Why don't you let us take a look at that, and we can bring an update back to the next Commission meeting.
Sure. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Rob. Further comments? Lisa.
Thank you. I noticed that there was a request for more shelters than we were able to provide. Is that new? That's a good news story. And then also, is there a way to review our budget if we're, ridership and comfort and all those things? Can we approve more shelters on an annual basis? Basically, can we match the budget to meet demand or as close as possible? Because it seems a shame to have to say no. So those are my questions.
So, excellent question. So through the chair, I'll actually defer this question to our infrastructure team. I'm not sure, is James Wadsworth available right now to speak to this one?
Sure. So we have a provincial program which the Victoria region is taking advantage of right now. So we have a certain budget approved, capital budget approved for bus shelters across the province. And this is the share that the Victoria Regional Transit System is getting. At this point, we're balancing it with other communities' needs. But if we chose to be more aggressive, we could potentially look at a separate capital project that would be funded by the Transit Commission if we chose to do more shelters. So that's something we could talk about perhaps at the next workshop if that's something we want to prioritize.
Sure. I mean, do staff need a motion at least to bring back to the commission a budget for, maybe look at the average of shelter requests over the last 5 years, how many have needed to be turned away and what the funding gap is. And just like, I don't know what the quantum is, but it would be good to have that information, James, as you say, and then we could decide, is this something we want to fund or is it not? So I don't know, Chair, do we need a motion to get staff to report back at the next workshop or?
I think that it has been flagged here, will be at the next workshop. I 100% agree with you. And it has always been frustrating that there has been more requests than we've been able to meet. And I know when this federal announcement was made, it was made to sound like a lot of money, but it filtered down to 100 bus stops in BC or something, so it's good, but this is, I think, a big part of our, like as you see it, need to make our system more comfortable, more welcoming, more convenient, and yeah. So,
and in some cases, less 1970s. Like some of the bus shelters that I see in Victoria, I actually feel embarrassed by.
Yeah.
And hopefully those are the ones our staff are bringing forward, but it's a bit of a hodgepodge. So, okay, that would be great if staff can bring forward just, an analysis of what the funding gap has been over the last 5 years. And then do we want to plug it with our own money, essentially?
Perfect. Let's talk about it. Yeah.
Briefly say that at the same time, I think we're going to be making plans with the City of Victoria and Saanich and probably the West Shore communities about projects for rapid bus style shelters on the main corridors. So perhaps it's all part of the same thing with different phases.
Good. Thanks for filling in that gap, James. Appreciate it. Other comments on the infrastructure update? Or no, we're on the planning at this point. Yeah. If not, this is just for our information. So no action is needed on it. Let's go to the infrastructure. Yes.
Susan, I did have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
The first one is in relation to Lisa's Help's comment about the bus shelters, and in a report a little later, it mentions how many have been requested, how many are able to be done, and then how many have been done so far. So I know we're just sort of earlier in the season. Do we know the ones that have been approved, when they will be completed?
Levi?
Excellent question. So through the chair, I'll defer this one to James and his team again as well, as that is more falls within their purview. So happy to pass that along to James if he has any context.
I could answer the question now, or we did have some information in our update, but we have, I think, 20. We have 11 approved this year, but the ones that were approved last year we're in the process of installing right now, and there's 18 shelters that are being installed through the 2021 year that were approved as part of last year's budget. So they get installed throughout the year. We work with each local government to prep the sites and schedule an installation.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that answer. And then my second question, in the report, they talked about how the fall scheduling and anticipation that they'll be opening up of going back to schools and universities. And I guess my question is, annually, with any, I guess, corporation or company, there's a certain amount of retirements and I'm just wondering whether we're on par or on the path to make sure that we have sufficient staffing when that comes in the fall, because by the sounds of it, you'll be needing to be at either full capacity or not. But whether you're training new drivers, you're recruiting new drivers, and whether there'll be enough drivers. And I think that comes from reading another report about sometimes buses not running because of an inability to get an operator. So I wouldn't mind a comment on that unless it wants to be responded to in another report.
So is yours, Levi? Would you like to take that?
I think that would probably be Kevin Schubert if he's here, part of the operations.
Kevin, are you?
I can speak to it first and then maybe pass it off to Kevin.
Sure.
So it's a great question. So through the chair, that is honestly the biggest limiting factor in terms of how many service hours we can deliver this fall. We would like to return almost to our historical service levels, but the number of operators was really what was constraining us. So we are working very closely with the operations team and the scheduling teams to really find the most flexible way of delivering as much service as we can. The goal is to reach a certain level of operators by the start of the fall semester, and then they're going to be continuing to hire over the fall period as well. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's something that we're working very closely with our HR team and operations, scheduling, and planning, all collaborating very closely. So I'll pass it over to Kevin if he has anything further to add.
Anything further, Kevin?
Yeah, without, I wouldn't say we're struggling. I think one of the challenges we had was the information coming on the predicting when we're going to return to a full new normal. And at the time when some key decisions were made, the full projection was going to be January 2022. And so when at the end of February, early March, there was a realization or the early indication to post-secondaries that there might be a full return, we shifted back to hiring. But to realize some of those savings that were referred to earlier and some of the running times, we required a lower operator requirement. So to do that, some attrition was allowed for in January and February. And now we're just bringing ourselves back up to a level, but it's having to be sped up for that September date now. And of course, the onboarding and recruitment process is a little bit different in this environment. So we're certainly doing our best to get back up to a normal level. We're our recruitment area and people and culture are doing a phenomenal job. So I feel optimistic we're getting there. To the comment about missed service, we're doing very well with missed service up until within the last month. And so we've seen when the vaccinations process came in and we had a larger group exposed, we've faced some challenges, and then we've had a bit of a trifecta effect here in the last week or two where you might hear something now. But I don't think that would be a norm we intend to experience, and we're doing everything to offset that. So yes, certainly, I think last week, if you looked at some of our numbers, there would be some indications that what was missed would be noticeable to a rider. But generally, we've sustained a very high service level. I know certainly higher than what most agencies hold themselves accountable to. So yeah, hopefully that answers your questions. Happy to address any other questions.
Yeah, thank you. I'll look forward to the August meeting to see how we're doing with recruitment. As everyone knows, I know a little bit about the training and the amount of time it takes. And I'm sure during COVID, maybe less people can be trained at one time because of distancing. So just making sure that we're on track for fall to have the staff that we need to be able to give the customer service that we would like, and not sort of getting to fall and saying, oh my gosh, we're needing this many more drivers and we're not going to be able to have them trained in time for this. So I look forward to maybe an update in August. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any others? One question I would have, Levi, is we're kind of factoring in the expectation that students will return, and we know that's a big part of our market. Does transit have any formal relationship with any of the major employers in the area, like public service and such, to get some kind of indication of when they're expecting to return to in-person service, so that we can factor that into our planning?
Excellent question, Chair Bryce. So I know earlier in the pandemic process, we'd reached out to, for example, the province, just to kind of see what their plans were for returning to the office environment on a regular basis. It's something that we have done historically, and we could probably continue to look into more closely as things continue to return to normal. So it's a good suggestion. I think it's something that we can look back into in greater detail to start to plan for all of those eventualities as well. So thank you for that comment.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, we'll thank you, Levi, for that report, and go on to James for the infrastructure.
Great. Where? Oh, here I am. Just sharing. Okay, for the infrastructure planning report. Oh, we've got the ridership report up. Yeah, this is for information. A quick update on our Handy Dart project. We're advancing through the design process. We're at 50% now for design. We are planning to have 5 battery electric buses deployed as part of, I guess, the initial opening of the facility, and over time we will convert to more battery electric Handy Dart buses. I could also say we're working with the CRD and stakeholders on where the Galloping Goose is going to be aligned through the project area, as well as some water main upgrades. We're also we've also done consultation with the neighborhood group in April, and we're continuing to do consultation on the site design layout. There's another phase coming up in July. We're continuing to engage First Nations as part of the project as we move forward to go forward with federal and provincial permit applications. We're talking to the First Nations, the Esquimalt and Songhees, about cultural recognition opportunities on the site. As we move forward through design, we're looking at fall 2021 for doing some site prep work on site, and full construction mobilizing in the spring of 2022. In terms of CNG fueling, that project is now complete out at our Langford Transit Center. I think we've spoken about the bus shelter program. This year we're in the process of constructing 18 shelters, and we're planning 11 more for next year. We'll have more discussions on how we can potentially look at doing more, probably what the number of shelters that we've done across the region and what the historic demand is. In terms of projects that are still in the planning and development level, we're still working through the operations and maintenance facility plan, and we're hoping to have that done this summer. I think there's some smaller projects as part of that out in Langford that we're starting to move forward with now that help us improve maintenance. I would call it maintenance capacity out there, so we can support more buses with expansion out there. We're also continuing to work with local governments to look at advancing plans for rapid bus. So concept work around what rapid bus stations could be. We're putting together a study for that. We're going to do with the City of Victoria. We're working with Saanich staff on looking at Mackenzie corridor for rapid bus, the conceptual work around that. What does it cost? What do we want to implement? Out in the West Shore, we're bringing the business case forward for the Island Highway transit priority work this June. We have budgeted for it in the Commission's budget, so we're hoping that we can be moving towards advancing construction in the fall on that. I would also say that we're working with the ministry and Saanich, starting to look at a study for transit-oriented development at Uptown. I think we've spoken to that in the past. We're in the process of hiring an architect to help us develop a plan there. There's projects going on out on Highway 14 with the realignment of Connie Road, which includes a park and ride out by the 17-mile pub. And the ministry is still doing some bus priority planning on Highway 1 and Highway 17. Okay, that's a brief overview. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Lots going on. Questions of James? Well, we've got him here. He's the guy who has all the info on this infrastructure. Any questions? Yes, Charlene.
Yeah, thank you for that update. A question I have, and I was talking to some transit folks, and we're talking about the compressed natural gas being out in Langford. And I guess my question I was asking and wondering, does that mean that the buses, depending on the ones that need the natural gas, whenever they are being used, they have to leave the Langford terminal and then get to the location, basically, out of service, to where they have to start. And then they do their route, and then after their route has come to an end, then they have to deadhead out of service back to Langford. Is that what I understand? And if so, does that mean that over an hour or so, that bus would be running and staffed without actually having any passengers?
James.
Yeah, so let me explain how transit works around the 2 yards. We have 2 yards that we deploy vehicles out of. There's 154 at the Victoria Transit Center, and there's approximately 130 out of Langford. The bulk of the service in the region is in what we call the core municipalities. And so whether it's diesel, battery electric bus, or natural gas, there are buses out of the Langford facility that have to leave there, and they go into service at places like the Victoria General Hospital, Royal Oak. Some of them even have to go as far as UVic. So yes, deploying buses from the Langford facility is not as efficient as the Victoria facility. That is why we maximize the number of buses that we park at the Victoria yard, because it reduces deadhead. And over time, we know that we would, given the opportunity, we'd like to put all our buses at the Victoria Transit Center, but that's not possible. And the third facility that we've planned is the one that will be advancing at Commerce Circle. And once that facility is open, we would probably move as many buses as we possibly could from the Langford facility to the Commerce Circle one, because that would give you the most effective transit service plan. I know that the costs of deadheading out of Langford are very high, and that was a decision that was made years ago. If we had things perfectly, we probably have 60 to 80 buses running out of Langford, and we'd have the rest of the buses between the two operating centers when they open up in the Victoria system. So the transit planners, the schedulers, operations are always looking at how the service is deployed and trying to find creative ways to make it as effective as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Further questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thanks, James, for that. Operations update, Kevin?
Yes, thank you. I don't have too much further add. We covered sort of one of the key things I want to highlight is there's a lot of effort going into preparing for the fall. And to the earlier question, I mean, I won't say that's not the thing that's keeping me up at night, is that what it's going to take to be very successful at that time. So we are doing what we can to prepare our operator numbers, prepare our service scenarios, and how we will meet demand, particularly unknown demand. That's one of the key things. So I appreciate Levi's touched on some of that. Two other things you want to note. The first quarter I sort of touched on, that was in the report. We still sustain a very high level right now. Just to our point there, we're closer probably to 99.6. So again, that itself is a fairly high level, but it does mean you have more fluctuation on the days. And so that's just more something recent we hope is very short term. So we're providing some updates in the future. I also want to highlight something that was kind of really positive that occurred within the new fiscal year. Our customer relations team's taken on the social media aspect of the operational type conversation we can have with customers. So really excited to see how that evolves. That includes posting alerts through the transit app, but also responding through Twitter and other social media platforms. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. And if there's any other questions I can address, the rest I think is fairly self-explanatory in the report.
Thanks, Kevin. Members of the commission, anything further you'd like explained? Questions?
Just Chair, really good.
Yes.
Really appreciate it, Chair. Thank you.
Terrific. So further questions, we'll just receive that for information. Now, Kevin, you are going to bring in the Atac minutes, which of course we just received for information. I know we've read them all. Is there anything in that set of minutes that you think we should be alerted to?
No, the only thing I'd like to highlight, please, just that it was one of the most productive meetings. I think we're taking a bit of a different approach to really utilize the advisory committee as a tool to inform some of our projects and be more connected to its purpose. And so I've felt that was valuable, and I just want to highlight that. I think we had a very successful meeting, and we got a great plan for the upcoming year, and I look forward to bringing some recommendations to the commission at our next meeting as to any revisions to the terms of reference.
Great. And any member of the commission have questions of Kevin on those minutes? No, that's fine. Thanks for that, Kevin. And we'll wait to get your updated report at the next meeting. And that takes us to our final item. Robin, I know you've had a chance to say some of the issues that are important from the student's perspective, but we'd like to hand it over to you now if there are any other things that you wish us to be alerted to.
Thank you. I think mainly those were the main concerns, and I am still pretty new in my role, so have just had a couple of meetings to gauge other students' concerns and other student societies. I think that those the motion, the way that it coming back to that at a later date is something that we definitely appreciate. We will really love having further consultation, and once again, I think many of the student societies asked me to reiterate that we hope to just continue being involved and even continuing our advocacy for a voting seat in the future, because we believe that would be really, really meaningful. And we're expecting full, pretty much in-class return to campus in the fall. I think move-in date is September 5th for residences. So that's a day that will be super cool to see. And so I'm sure ridership will increase quite a bit at that point as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. I agree. Super cool on many levels as far as having the universities back and functioning in person. We appreciate your input today. And as always, we'll look and make sure that you're identified on the agenda for anything that you wish to raise. So members of the commission, we are through in less time than we had set aside, which is always good. Our next scheduled meeting is for August the 10th. If there's no further business for the commission to consider at this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Tate?
Seconded.
Tate moves.
Murdoch?
Seconded by Murdoch. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Go on. Have a great day.